So it's really great to be here. Again, thank you for taking time out of your schedules to join this session, especially for those in the virtual environment. Was getting some text. We have people that are tuning in from Brazil as well as across the pond in Europe. So thank you guys for tuning in all the different time zones. So I'm Dr. Brittany Duggar, pleasure to be here. I'm currently the Ultimate Supreme Leader, otherwise known as the Neuropathology Core Chair right now, but I guess as of today, Dr. Kapasi will be taking that over. Hi, Dr. Kapasi in the front, fangirl in it. We bid a farewell to the fabulous Dr. Wisniewski, and happy early birthday, Dr. Wisniewski. And then a welcome, or congratulations or condolences to Dr. Flanagan, for being a new member. There were many who applied. This is really, really tough. It's really great to be such an awesome community of fantastic neuropath people. Many people who applied, we want to just thank you for that, but there only is one winner as of now. Maybe that'll change in the future, right? Also new this year, we've had early career representatives. Again, a big thank you to all the persons who applied. This is really, really tough. There's so much great talent and diversity. You can see also thank you for the Rec Corps for your aid in concocting the eligibility for the candidates, and big kudos and condolences, both in the same sentence, to Dr. Ohm and Dr. Latimer, who will be joining us as early career representatives. So if you do see them, please give them a congrats or condolences, depending on how you want to view this committee. So that's what we consist of. So what else is going on in the neuropathology realm? Well, there's much. So if you are not aware, we're trying to have a clinical pathology conference. There's been a big push to probably have a video library. So obviously, if you're going to do this, why not form a working group? This is currently headed by Dr. Maggie Flanagan, but Dr. Elizabeth Head, to give her a shout out too. I know she had a lot behind the scenes to do with this. The main goal is to develop a clinical path library as an educational tool to enhance the pipeline of a diverse workforce, but also I'm thinking of diverse workflows. Many of us are across the ADRCs, even though we are one. A lot of us do things differently, and it's great to learn from different people and benchmark. The meetings for this working group began in January. There was a survey that was sent out. I think a lot of you guys participated in that to discuss these opportunities and challenges. So thinking about privacy, confidentiality, the IRB perspectives, if these clinical pathology things are recorded, can there be CME credits? Access to the recording, who and how is it going to be done, could help with messaging and encouraging about brain donation. And so where kind of are we now with that? Again, if you're interested in being a part of this, please contact Dr. Flanagan. They have done some trials of scrubbing de-identification, and big thank you to Pete Nelson and Elizabeth Head for being the quote-unquote guinea pigs of this. I don't know if that's the best model system. Maybe it's a rat for Alzheimer's disease, but whatever. Actually, it's real human tissue, if you talk my opinion. They've met with NAC to discuss the goals, and they are meeting with other people, Dr. Silverberg, other attendees as well, Dr. Glover, Dr. Latimer, to have specific feedback on questions. These are some of the results from the survey that was done a while back. At that time, there was 32 ADRCs. Definitely want to give a big welcome to some of the new ADRCs that are joining our family fold. But there were 63 total responses, so there are some duplicates with the ADRC. So again, but just wanting to show you the results. So the purpose of the CPCs, with the respondents, 50% stated that it was training, 43% case reviews, other things were research ideas, community engagement. With the structure, the most responses were typically the duration was 1 hour for the CPCs. The frequency, 47% said they met monthly for the clinical path conferences. Cases discussed were typically 1 to 2. And again, just presenting you these overall main results for that. The common data that was reviewed with the clinical pathology conferences, clinical, MRI, neuropsych, biomarkers, PET, tau, the typical. And then 65% of respondents state that their CPCs were not recorded, and the main thing was the HIPAA privacy concern. But 40% were willing to contribute to a video library. But again, I know we're emphasizing the confidentiality, but if those who have witnessed these CPCs, a lot of times they're informal discussions, and things can be very interesting with those informal discussions. So there's also a little bit of concern about that as well. They are not typically like canned talks, because people can be blinded to the diagnosis. And then for the library development, 94% supported it, so hence the working group to set the guidelines. 76% were interested in attending CPCs from other ADRCs. And I can say, standing up here, I am very thankful to some of the ADRCs that have allowed me that great privilege to sit in on those. At UC Davis, a lot of our cases are community-based, so I don't get to see those rare cases. I'm able to sit in on all these different CPCs to kind of keep my acumen and everything going to be sharp as a tack or something like that. Another thing that's going on in the ADRC cores, Neuropath, the Digital Pathology Working Group, which has kind of morphed into a journal club now. There's a lot of stuff going on, so we're just trying to keep the momentum up. This is now led by Dr. Kurt Farrell, so if you are interested in actually presenting a paper, or you have a paper that you recently read in the digital path realm, feel free to contact Kurt. Also, you see this QR code. I'm still not, I haven't even done it at a restaurant, but you can see there's this QR code if you want to scan that. A lot of the videos are available on YouTube, from how to select the best slide scanner for your group, how to use QPath, how to use Halo. I hear that they're more popular than videos of cats being scared by cucumbers. That's what I've heard the metric for. Other things which will be discussed tomorrow a little bit more in depth is clarity. And big shout out to Dr. Dirk Keene, who is leading the Neuropath portion of that. And Dirk, sorry I don't have your consent, but I feel like you're open to discussing that with people in the room. I'm trying to see where you're at. The lights are pretty bright. So if you're interested in understanding the Neuropath, doing some really cool things with quantitative analysis using Halo, and then doing digital path repository. And speaking of digital path repositories, this has been shared before, but we are making progress. There was a grant announcement for an RFA a little bit ago for a U24. 2 sites were funded. One consisted of a team of Dr. Gutman, Dr. Pierce, who is here today. So Dr. Pierce, I think you're wearing the light blue. Yeah, so if you want to say hi. Myself and Dr. Lee Cooper. Another team is led by Dr. Pete Nelson, Dr. Cody Bumgardner, and Maggie Flanagan. We are working in parallel towards the same goal. We're using a backbone of the Digital Slide Archive, which was a huge investment from the National Cancer Institute. So how to leverage and enhance that, because with neuropathology, a lot of times within the brain, you have a lot more nested variables than you would with cancer samples. So the BDSA, in case you want another acronym to remember. So we're hoping to try to support, we're already in the works for this, to support multiple slide scanning vendors and file types. And using application programming interfaces to have a vendor agnostic manner for this, to access the image data, create and querying annotations, so when you mark up the slide, how do you do that, and deploying image analysis on those. So adapting, again, this existing infrastructure, leveraging and enhancing it, a great way to work together, an investment from the National Cancer Institute. How can we adapt that to ADRDs? And with this comes data, right? So, and then if you all got your little booklet thing, right? This is kind of in here with the NAC data platform. So NAC has been trying to integrate all of this, and one of that aspect is a digital pathology supplement that they received. And myself and Dr. Dirk Keene are helping with that. And the biggest thing with this is we are trying to develop metadata standards for digital pathology. So a lot of the data that does get put in for Neuropath tends to be on a case diagnosis level. It's not on a slide level. So we have to create that road. So how do we do that? Right now, in a lot of like that Brain Digital Slide Archive, there's a couple other groups that we've started to do this. So stay tuned. Dr. Kapasi will probably, as the chair, will probably be sharing some data and stuff to get your feedback. We want your feedback to basically think about how we do this metadata appropriately to include things, but not too much to where it gets confusing. We want things nimble. Then the other aspect to this is, so NAC's helping with this, but also CARD, the Center for Alzheimer's and Related Dementias. They're also looking at metadata standards, but they're trying to do it more from a machine learning standpoint, where they actually queried a lot of databases, even from an international level, so working with people in Europe, South America. I'm trying to think of all the different people that have been on those calls. If you're interested in being a part of this, please contact Mike Knowles. I did have his permission to put up his email for that. So they're doing stuff, and they're trying to integrate omics data similar to what NAC is doing, but more on maybe an international level. And then we just heard, and again, it's hard to follow that amazing session that we had on brain donation. So very amazing to collaborate, which I think it's been the first time at an ADRC meeting that the Neuropath Core actually collaborated with the OR Core. Please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but very exciting. And again, a big thank you to the panelists and the moderators for that. So there has been a focus on brain donation. So we've had a lot of discussion, but what I want to show you is some metrics. So special thanks to NAC, and this is where I'm going to slow down because I really want people to look at these data. So we had, as of this September 2024 data freeze, there was over 8,000 participants that had Neuropath data in our cores, across our cores. And I want you to look at these numbers of people from underrepresented groups. And that N is a number, that's not a percent. The percent I rounded up, right, to 1%. 74 identified as Asian, 290 as Hispanic and Latino, and then Black, 311, out of over 8,000. But there is kudos, so I want to give kudos to some of those top contributors and centers. So again, pausing on this and letting sure that this gets digested of where we're at. And on top of that, so those were some of the underrepresented groups. Let's talk about American Indian, Alaskan Native, as well as Pacific Islanders. And here, these are everything that was in the NAC database. 6 Pacific Islanders, 8 American Indian, Alaskan Native descendants. And kudos, I know there's a lot of initiatives, and with brain donation, I look at brain donation almost as a 401k. You have to make those investments. It can be long. Sometimes even within our own ADRC, we'll have participants after 15 years they'll pass. This is an investment. But just showing you these metrics and letting this sink in. So based on that, the focus of the rest of this session, Dr. Alifia Kapasi will be presenting results on a brain donation survey, of which I think we had over 90% response rate. So again, thank you for responding to that survey to think about how we can move forward better. And then there's going to be some great presentations by Dr. Lingler and Dr. Whitmer on some of the initiatives that they've been working on to help increase this diversity. And then we'll have questions at the end. So with that, I will stop because I know we're a couple minutes behind, and I just saved 2 minutes. So I will stop there for the fabulous incoming chair, Dr. Alifia Kapasi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Brittany. So I'm going to go over the survey results. And the goal of the survey was really to promote this collaboration, the synergy between Neuropath cores and OR cores and other cores at your ADRC. We wanted to understand, what are the effective strategies being used for research participation or to agreement to brain donation. And we wanted to identify what neuropathology cores were doing in terms of activities within and outside of the center. And we did get a 100% response rate, so really big thank you to you all for completing the survey. Really, really appreciate it. So we asked, how do you identify yourself within the ADRC? This survey was designed for the neuropathology core members, but you can see that at least 21% of individuals were other ADRC positions, like coordinators, administrators, research specialists, and directors. When asking about brain donation among minoritized and underrepresented groups, Majority of the ADRCs do have a brain donation program. Of course, most of the materials are in English, but a large proportion of ADRCs do have brain donation materials in Spanish as well. And you can see here the racial and ethnic diversity groups, a lot of focus on Black and African Americans and Hispanics, but you can see that the other underrepresented groups, there's very low numbers. We asked where and how this information on brain donation is disseminated. So a lot of popular choices at the ADRC, clinics, religious communities, universities. We heard about some of these approaches in the all-core session as well as many different methods on disseminating this information, so one-on-one discussions, newsletters, social media, and radio. And you can see here that we did have a comment field, so if there were other additional effective strategies, the ADRC could add in that comment. And really, the most common comment across the board was being present in the community. We heard that from the all-core, and so that's a really important part. But you can see here, again, a number of different activities, from retention events, advertisements, collaborations, having research champions. We also heard about that as well. And then we asked about neuropathology core involvement in outreach, and it was amazing to see that 62% of ADRCs, their neuropathology cores, are actively involved in outreach and education. And this can be as frequent as needed. Some do it at a monthly basis. And again, the activities range from educational presentations, webinars, podcasts, and actually holding brain bank tours for their ADRC participants. And then we also recognize that there can be these overlapping lines of roles and communication, and so we did include a question on consent. And while the majority of ADRCs, the neuropathology core, does not have involvement in consenting, the next common answer was having high involvement. So 12 ADRCs, the neuropathology core, is actively being involved in consenting for most participants for brain donation. And then we also wanted to understand more about the educational activities, right? That goes beyond the CPC. Again, across the board, brain cutting conferences, microscopy case consults, training of rec, neuropathology fellows, students. That was consistent across all the ADRCs. But there are all these other different activities that the different ADRCs are doing in their neuropathology course to promote this really important topic. And there are ongoing established programs right now with efforts on brain donation with a focus on racial and ethnic communities. So there's a collaboration between Duke and the Medical Examiner Office to collect postmortem brains with a focus on African Americans, the Candle study and Life After 90, of which Dr. Whitmer is a PI, and we're going to hear more about her on those studies. The Minority Aging Research Study led by Dr. Lisa Barnes, brain donation among African Americans in community-based cohorts. And there are different grant opportunities that have brain donation component embedded in there. And of course, there are many other established brain donation programs, right, for the ADRCs to be involved in. And these are some of the listed ones from the survey. So with that, I just want to give thank you again to all of you for participating in the survey. You're all 1 in a mile in. But thank you, Hannah, for the continuous emails and keeping us on track. And of course, the Neuropathology Core steering committee members and the All Core steering committee members. We really worked together to develop this survey. And of course, Nina Silverberg and all at NAC. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jen Lingler from the University of Pittsburgh. Thank you to Dr. Duggar and the steering committee for this invitation to share an initiative that we are undertaking at Pitt. Industry relationships to disclose. And I'm going to start with some background because the brain donation initiative that we're implementing builds on some work that we've been doing to increase racial and ethnic diversity in our clinical core at the ADRC. as Dr. Duggar just showed us with some really stark and profound numbers, there's a tremendous need to increase inclusivity, especially with respect to race and ethnicity across the AD Centers network. That's not only true for involvement in the clinical core and UDS data collection, but this challenge extends to brain donation. And as we just heard from Dr. Kapasi, there are a number of innovative and creative endeavors across the center's network and beyond to address this challenge. And while there's no magic bullet, one of the approaches that we've been leaning into at the University of Pittsburgh is the use of storytelling, story sharing, to address both better representation in our clinical core and, again, thinking forward to applying this work to our brain donation program. And I think that you need look no further than the testimonies that we heard this morning from Katie and Nancy and Tish to appreciate the potential for storytelling to make an impact in this space. I mentioned the parent study that is providing the basis for this initiative at Pitt. So the Recruitment Innovations for Diversity Enhancement, or RIDE study, was an investigation of the effect of culture-centric narrative on recruitment into clinical research on ADRD, or specifically the clinical core at Pitt. I'll talk a little bit about the conceptual underpinnings in a moment, but essentially we conducted ethnographic interviews with 24 African American or Black identifying participants in our center or study partners, and elicited their stories of research participation to put together a set of narrative-based materials to use for our outreach and engagement team, and those materials are actually being used, and that narrative campaign is underway as we speak. One thing about those materials, so while they do feature some personal stories from individuals who are willing to be identified, there's also value in eliciting and using and grounding work in stories of individuals who might be hesitant to share their personal story. And that's where the ethnographic analysis came into play, where we were able to develop sort of composite stories that tapped into themes that were cross-cutting across interviews. So this slide is a little bit busy, but our colleague from Arizona State, the cerebellar researcher, you've got a treasure at Arizona State in your College of Nursing in Linda Larkey. I've learned so much from her work about the use and potential of culture-centric narrative. She has used this to promote health behaviors in individuals from minoritized communities, and we're of course applying it to promote research involvement and hopefully ultimately involvement in brain donation programs. So one thing when we're doing this in minoritized communities, we want to be culturally salient in the materials that we develop. So it's important to have characters or feature individuals whose stories are engaging or realistic, relatable, and have cultural embeddedness. You've got to tell those stories in sticky ways that will resonate with people, and hopefully through materials that could proliferate or have the potential to proliferate within a culture sharing community. And then ultimately the outcomes of interest operationalized for us are receptiveness to interest in clinical research and or brain donation, and then with the behavior being enrollment or provisional consent. So just a quick moment to contrast this narrative approach with traditional approaches. Slide's pretty comprehensive, but some things that I'll point out. When we use stories to give people information about research participation or brain donation program participation opportunities, we are centering the messaging in the priorities that community members identify. And I'll show you in a moment how that looks a little different from how, say, a pamphlet or a traditional piece of literature might look. One other thing I'll point out on this slide, we were recently challenged to think about how this work may have structural underpinnings, And what I learned from one of our rec scholars at the University of Pittsburgh, Dr. Lucilia Williams, she drew my attention to some literature on cultural capital, and has convinced me that when we tell stories, when we ground this messaging in the voices of individuals from minoritized communities, we are in fact drawing upon cultural capital and prioritizing those voices in a really unique way. Okay, so QR codes. The ones on the top of the screen take you to some of our materials. Ones on the bottom take you to some of our publications reporting on findings from focus group analyses and some other work that we've done. But let me take a moment to, well, actually, I'll just point out one thing. The Annie's story at the top there, that's in the form of what we call a participant profile. So these are printouts that our community engagement team takes to community events. We also have it available on our website and other forums. If you notice the tagline there, Annie participates to honor her grandmother. Anyone who spends time in representation science and in that literature will know that the literature tells you that people volunteer for research for altruism toward kin, next of kin, right, for future generations. But when we listen to what participants are telling us, they often describe participating to honor previous generations. So again, looks a little different when we let participants lead. Let's hear from Jean. This was a spontaneous story that she shared with us at a community event, so much so that our engagement coordinator, Melita Terry, said, we've really got to see if she'd be willing to share her story for use in this narrative campaign. So let's go ahead and play that video, just the beginning of it.
I belong to Central Baptist Church, and we have a seniors program there. And the chairperson let us know that we were going to have a speaker from the Alzheimer's Disease Research Program. She presented what is normal aging, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, is this normal aging what I'm going through? And I wanted to learn more about what was going on now with my mind, that now that I'm over 60, I felt a change in me, mentally and physically. I feel that the information was there, that I could go to it and get help. I made up in my mind that I was going to do that. The staff, they just all put me at ease. I went through a physical, as they say, from head to toe. I guess the most challenging was when I was doing the test. I found out through this that I was experiencing, and still experiencing, short-term memory loss. I didn't feel dumb. I didn't feel embarrassed, and I know that I can call them if I'm having a problem.
Sorry. That last piece that she said, I didn't feel dumb, I didn't feel embarrassed. Culture-centric narrative. We know that shame, stigmatization are really major barriers to participation. She said earlier, the staff, they put me at ease. That was her spontaneous sharing of her story. That was not scripted or fed to her. But I can't think of a more powerful way to communicate research participation opportunities to people who might have experienced discrimination in medical settings. Okay. So in terms of the brain donation initiative, as we think about applying this work in this context, a few things to note and challenges that we're encountering. So if you will know, the University of Pittsburgh was not at the top of that list for centers that are really leading the way in getting more diversity in samples. Western Pennsylvania is primarily non-Hispanic white area, and our clinical core composition reflects that, although we strive and do over-represent. But as a result, we have a pretty small number of individuals to approach about sharing, their families to approach about their experience with brain donation. And there are a lot of things that have to be in place. It has to be the right time. Sometimes people are grieving, so that's kind of a long road and could very much take time. So we've recently pivoted to eliciting stories from individuals who've provided provisional consent and are moving forward with that. So it is taking time, and we do look forward to coming back and sharing some of those materials with you when they're available, and of equal importance to sharing the results of that initiative. So I'd like to take a moment to thank the original RIDE study team featured here, which was a collaboration of individuals from Pitt, University of Virginia, Vanderbilt University, and I don't know if Dr. Katasha Davis is in the room, but we have collaborators listed, and we'd partnered with Frameworks Institute, where Dr. Davis was working at the time before joining NIA and assisting with recruitment initiatives there. So with that, I will hand things over to Dr. Whitmer.
Yes, we will welcome back up to the stage Dr. Kapasi, Dr. Lingler, Dr. Whitmer, and Dr. Duggar. All right, and it looks like our first question is from Annika Noreen.
Hi, I totally agree that we need better and higher brain donations from community outreach and all the think programs. I'm wondering about the more than one race category. If that was part of the data you presented. It's one of the fastest growing groups in the US, I think.
Sorry, is this,
this is for
question
Brittany.
is
This is for
me.
Brittany. The data you presented from NAC, I'm wondering if the more than one race category from NAC was at all represented in what the numbers you presented. I'm just curious.
Oh. I'm going to call on NAC for that because I asked for the tables. Catherine, hi, because NAC knows everything, right?
It seems to me that the query might have been for someone who identified as only run one race to be presented there. It seemed to me that that might have been the case.
Yeah, but I think your question is very valid. I think those numbers, even with the multiple, might have been very low, but I can definitely see me after and we can make sure that that data is in there. But I'm trying to remember from previous data polls that I've done how a lot of that data is distributed. But if anyone from NAC can come to the mic and help.
Hey, Brittany.
Oh, thank you. Thank you again for your help with that data poll, by the way.
Yeah, of course. I don't think the multi-racial category was included in the numbers, but if you want, I can get you new tables that have that category in there.
And this is a great plug for NAC. You can request data from NAC, right?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm following. Okay.
Hey, I just want to applaud the Neuropath Core Steering Committee leaders, Tom and Brittany and Olivia, for just an outstanding job putting this together and emphasizing the role of access to brain donation and how do we improve access to families who might otherwise not know about it. If I had a vote, and I don't, but if I had a vote, I would ask the Neuropath Core Steering Committee to think about developing a resource that brings all the great things we've heard today and from all the other centers and other brain biorepository networks as a resource that we could all go to, maybe hosted at NAC, to really get the word out, because we're all doing things that are effective, but we're not all doing the same thing, and having access to that resource would be really tremendous.
Thank you for that very keen comment. And this is something to think about. We do have some early career representatives that are going to be joining us and thinking about initiatives that they can spearhead. So Dr. Ohm, Dr. Latimer, hi.
All right, we have time for these final two questions. We'll start over on my left.
Hi, I'm Allison Lindar. I'm from the Oregon Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. And my sisters and I have a farm in Red Bluff where we have lots of turkeys north of Davis. But that's not the point. The question is, Jennifer, can we apply your methodology to understand what rural families need? And if rural families are interested in brain donation, how do we capture that data? And how do we get the brains from, Banks, Oregon to OHSU? I know that Randy has that figured out, but it's an issue that we deal with in Oregon, where we have like 2 big cities and the rest is really rural.
Thanks, Allison. Yeah, so we're really fond of and have come to conceptualize the storytelling technique as a tool. And it's a tool that can be implemented or incorporated into any number of strategies or interventions that you want to assess. And actually, I mentioned Linda Larkey as in developing those materials, and if you do run them by groups from whatever culture sharing community you might be interested in, and certainly rural individuals from a given geographic region, there's actually a tool now available to assess how your material performs in terms of cultural salience. So yeah, great question.
So my name's Elaine Bearer, and I'm from a brand new ADRC in New Mexico. Hybrid.
Welcome to the family.
Thank you. And we just started getting funded this past summer, and we're starting up a Neuropath Core. I am director now of that. And some of the impediments that we have on donations include these enormous long consent forms, and the fact that we have to have a consent for the clinical antemortem, and then another consent for the brain donation that has to be in place at our coroner's office. And it's a ton of paperwork that people have to go through. And I just wonder, I love what Dirk said, maybe we could have some local place where consent forms are shared, because we're struggling getting all of these different forms through our IRB, and then in line with the legal part of our state donation autopsy program, and then the poor families and patients who are reading 12 pages and trying to understand the whole thing. So anybody have any comments on that?
I mean, I think amalgamating across our centers is really wonderful. And of course, it's helpful. The caveat is that each IRB seems to have their own flavor. So I would really love some help, like, maybe even from the NIH on educating our IRBs, because I can tell you that the IRBs and the consent forms are the bane of my existence, and I'm certain have contributed to a shortening of my telomeres for sure. So, because I have to deal with, UC Davis, which has been great, but then Kaiser has a very different flavor of what they do. So that's the caveat, is that IRBs have their own flavor of kind of their culture and what they allow. And I think it's very challenging. And I agree with you, it's very onerous for that participant to look at that paperwork and go through it. And I know we're protecting the participants, but sometimes I walk away feeling like we did a disservice.
Well, I think if we had some central repository for various consent forms, we could then get ChatGPT to correlate them into the one we need.
That's a great idea. Yeah, that's a great idea. I like that.
The other thing I wanted to say about ethnicity, I think it would be nice if we could rather think of it as ancestry, and if we could have some follow-up. You go ahead. It's okay. It's okay.
Okay, and we are slightly over time, so I think we will wrap up there. Thank you so much.